Good morning. Today is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. This week's Torah portion, the Parsha VaYikra, and this third book of the Torah, the book of VaYikra, is largely preoccupied with the subject of Korbanos, which we usually translate as sacrifices. And the Ramban explains, we've discussed this before, that at least concerning the sacrifices that relate to a person who has committed a sin, when a person commits a sin, their soul becomes blemished in some way. And we don't want to appear before God with a blemished soul. So a korban is a ritual, a set of rituals that's intended to cleanse a person's soul. It's intended, it is a great kindness by God to give us a strategy, a method by which we can become cleansed and then again closer to God. But as we've mentioned many times before, what happens when there are no more korbanos? What happens when the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, is not active anymore? And that has been the case for the last almost 2,000 years. So then what do? Well, one thing that we do, a major thing that we do, that we've discussed before, is prayer. Prayer has always been a practice of the Jewish people, but when the sacrifices were halted, prayer becomes the substitute for the sacrifices. And at first glance, it may seem that doesn't look like a very likely candidate, because sacrifices are actions with objects, and prayer is verbal, it's emotional. There are no actions that go along with it, except a little bending and bowing. And even that is not essential to the prayer. The connection between prayer and korban is better understood when we more correctly translate the word korban. It is common that we translate the word korban as sacrifice. I've shared with you before from several different sources that translation of sacrifice is a very poor translation. It's extremely imprecise, because the word korban means to come close. So a korban is an action or a set of actions that's designed to bring us closer to God. And when we understand the actual meaning of the word korban, then prayer becomes the obvious choice in the absence of actual korbanos, because prayer brings us closer to God. It brings us in conversation with God. We can speak directly to God. We have a certainty and a confidence that God is listening to every word that we say. That is coming closer par excellence. And so it makes perfect sense that prayer should be the substitute for the korbanos. There is another substitute for the sacrifices. We've discussed this before, but I want to put it in a slightly different context today. Our sages tell us that learning Torah about the sacrifices is now accepted by God as if we did the sacrifices. And that is why in our regular prayer service, we have sections where we review the procedures for the korbanos. And then we say to God, we ask that you accept the words that we have said, the learning that we have done, because remember, those sections of the davening are not prayer. They are study. We're studying the laws of the sacrifices of the korbanos. And we say to God, may it be your will that you accept the words that we say as if we did offer it. The Maharal, Rabbi Yehuda Lowy of Prague, asks a very, very interesting question. There is no other place in Jewish life where a person has a mitzvah to do, and for whatever reason they don't do it, but they learn about it. They study about it. There's no other place where that is considered as if they have fulfilled the commandment. We're coming up to Pesach, and there's a mitzvah to eat matzah. There is no concept that if I don't want to eat matzah, I don't want to eat matzah. But I tell you what, I'm going to study the laws of matzah. I'm going to study the Torah of matzah. It's meaningless. There's a mitzvah to put on tefillin for men in the morning. I don't want to put on tefillin. It messes up my hair. I don't want to put on tefillin. So what I'll do is I'll study the laws of tefillin. And if I study the laws of tefillin, I learn Torah about tefillin, God should accept it as if I put on tefillin. It's ludicrous. It doesn't apply. Nowhere else in Jewish life is there such a thing. Why is it here? The Maharal explains, here it is exactly what we explained. Because the korban, the goal of the korban is karav, to come close. And just as prayer brings us close, the study of Torah brings us close. When we study Torah, we are bringing ourselves closer to God because we are understanding God's will. And what is it that we can possibly understand about God, who is invisible, who is unimaginable, who we cannot even conceptualize? What can we know about God? Well, what we can know about God is what God has taught us. So when we learn the Torah, really any area of Torah, we're accomplishing two things. Number one, we know a specific body of information. So let's say it's a practical area about the laws of observing Pesach. So when I learn those, when I study that part of the Torah, I know what to do. I know how to prepare for Pesach. I know how to observe it properly. But there's a second level. I understand something about God. Who is God? What is God? God is one who commands us to have a Seder, to tell the story, to eat matzah. This tells us something about God. And so studying the laws of the sacrifices brings us closer to God in a way that is different from, but with the same goal as prayer. And the same goal as the original Korbanos, karav, to come closer. This was expressed most beautifully by the Rav, Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, in a speech that he gave many years ago. He said, "When I study Torah, I feel the breath of eternity on my face. Even now when I am old, teaching Torah relieves me of the fear of death and of all the depressive moments which elderly people go through. When I do teach, I feel rejuvenated. If not for the study and teaching of Torah, I would have lost my sanity in the year of Triple Avelos in 1967. By the way, that experience in 1967, we're going to discuss that later this week. This is the Rav speaking. I was on the verge of mental collapse and breakdown. I did not. I emerged victorious, and this is due to one thing only, to my mad dedication to Torah. I felt somehow because of teaching Torah that I was not alone, that I had somebody, that somebody was invisible, but I felt their presence. He's talking about God, to confide. There was someone on whose shoulder I could cry, and there was somebody from whom I could almost demand words of solace and comfort. The study of Torah has had such a great cathartic impact on me. It's rooted in the wondrous experience I always have when I open up a volume of the Talmud. When I open a volume of the Talmud or any book of Torah to study, when I'm in company or even if I'm alone, I have the impression Don't call it a hallucination. It's not a hallucination. I have the impression as if I heard, I would say, soft footsteps of somebody invisible who comes in and sits down beside me, sometimes looking over my shoulder. It is simply, the idea is not a mystical idea. It is the Talmud. It's the Mishnah. It's the Talmud in Brachos. The Talmud says, even if one person is studying Torah, the Shekhinah, God's presence, rests on them. And we all believe that God, who gave the Torah, has never deserted the Torah. And God simply walks, God accompanies the Torah. Wherever a Torah has a rendezvous, an appointment, a date with someone, in other words, whenever someone is studying Torah, and God accompanies the Torah, God is there. And the Rav continues, therefore, the study of Torah has never been for me a dry, formal, intellectual performance act, no matter how important the role of intellect plays in the study of Torah. You know very well, and we've studied this many, many times, the Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik. I place great deal of emphasis on the intellectual plays in the study of Torah, in the intellectual understanding and analysis of Jewish law. We avail ourselves of the most modern methods of understanding, of constructing, of inferring, of classifying, defining, and so on. There is no doubt that the intellect plays a tremendous role in the study of Torah, and the Rabbi Soloveitchik personifies this with his extreme precision and intellectual vigor and rigor in the way that he studied Torah. However, Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, the study of Torah is more than an intellectual performance. It is an ecstatic experience in which one meets God. Gilui Shechina, the revelation of God's presence, is reenacted, restaged, and relived every time a Jew opens a Jewish book of Torah. That's the equation between Korban, prayer, and the study of Torah. They all have their separate methods, and they all have their separate goals, but they all have the common denominator to bring us closer to God. That's the goal. We do not have the Korbanos today, but we have prayer and we have the study of Torah that achieve precisely the same objective. And when we are engaged in prayer, and when we are engaged in the study of Torah, we cannot allow it to be just a dry intellectual experience. It must for us also be an ecstatic experience that brings us closer to God, that acts correctly in the same way the Korbanos are meant to act. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.